August 8th, 2023 marked the start of the deadliest wildfires in modern history on Hawaii, in particular on the island of Maui. As of August 15th, 99 people have been declared dead, with hundreds still missing, with survivors bracing for the worst. The causes leading up to the fire and the level of incompetence from local governments is pretty staggering. But there's also much more to this story, from investors and billionaires trying to buy up land to shady players trying to rebuild Maui as the world's first smart city. So what's really going on? And how did we get here? And what can be learned? Let's figure this out together. I'm Ricky, and this is 2-Bit Vinci. I really didn't want to make this video. I just made a video about the Canadian wildfires, which are still ongoing. And I also made a video about El Nino 2023 and how it was going to be really intense. Well, this would appear to be the first devastating effect. So let's start with what we know so far. On August 8th, around Maui County, authorities got the first reports of fire by 6:37 a.m. Police were circling neighborhoods on megaphones trying to convince people to evacuate, and they used nearby hydrants to fight fires. But these early calls to evacuate were met with strong reception because wildfires in Hawaii have quadrupled in recent decades. In August 2018, for example, brush fires broke out as Hurricane Lane neared Maui. The fires engulfed more than 2,000 acres and forced dozens to flee their homes. This is going to be really important. We'll get back to that in a second. Again, in 2019, large fires also whipped through Maui, burning roughly 25,000 acres of former sugarcane land and dry brush as Hawaii endured record high temperatures. So how did local governments respond? Well, they put out this, the State of Hawaii Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan, in February 2022. Here they've ranked how different natural hazards could potentially affect Hawaii. So where did wildfires rank? Near the absolute bottom. And what's really surprising is they have a low score for the impact and risk to people. That sounds a bit insane, but we'll come back to this. Trust me, there's a lot to unpack. There are currently 3 active fires: the South Maui Fires, Upcountry, and the West Maui Fires. The fire that burned Lahaina resulted in most of the destruction, and it was from the West Maui Fire. As of Monday, August 14th, 99 fatalities have been confirmed, and it's the largest number of deaths in an American wildfire since 1918, when 453 people died in the Cloquet Fire in Minnesota. Based on a crowdsourced database circulating on social media with a list of over 5,200 people, some 1,130 individuals are still listed as not located. So those fatality numbers are likely to go up, and that's absolutely heartbreaking because it's not even really fully safe to get back out there. At least 2,200 buildings were destroyed in the fire. 86% of them were residential, according to Hawaii Governor Josh Green. At a White House briefing on Monday, FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell said that more cadaver dogs were on their way to Lahaina, but that the search was extremely hazardous and would take time. Based on reports from local officials, the 99 fatalities reported are based on only 3% of the destruction searched so far. So those numbers are going to go up. The state's vaunted integrated outdoor siren warning system, the largest in the world with about 400 alarms, was not activated during the fires, according to the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency spokesperson Adam Weintraub. On Maui, the second largest island in the Hawaiian archipelago, there are 80 outdoor sirens to alert residents to tsunamis and other natural disasters. They sat silent as people fled for their lives. Nobody at the state and nobody at the county attempted to activate those sirens based on our records, said Adam Weintraub in an interview. While Maui's warning sirens were not activated, emergency communications with residents were largely limited to mobile phones and broadcasters at a time when most power and cell service was already cut. Most weren't prepared to anticipate just how quickly fires could spread. Now, let's take a minute and talk about the science of how this fire likely started. First of all, we do not officially know what started these fires, but here are some of the conditions present that led to this event. Maui was in a severe D1, D2 drought rating for most of the season leading up to this, and it was more dangerous than even California, that's really prone to wildfires. It was also hotter than usual, partially climate change and partially the El Nino of 2023. I have an entire video about what is going on with that, which I'll link below or in the description if you want to check that out after this one. Now, as far as lightning strikes go, I used the Blitzoctune database, which I used for the Canadian wildfires as well, which actually did show a correlation between lightning strikes and fire starting. But here in this case, I couldn't see any examples of any strikes actually happening on Hawaii in the 24 hours or 48 hours leading up to the fire starting. Then there was Hurricane Dora. Dora did not directly hit the islands, as you can see by this amazing visualization from Zoom Earth. It passed about 500 miles south of Honolulu. Around the time when the fire started, you can see what was happening here. Dora did not directly hit the islands, but it played a vital role in the Lahaina fires. At its closest, it was about 500 miles off the coast of Maui. A high-pressure system developed north of the islands as well, resulting in a gradient wind between high pressure and Dora, a low-pressure system. This is the approach of Hurricane Dora right here, right? And you can see that the gust speeds start to really pick up. So the highest wind gust that I could find was about 62 coming off of here. And because of the hurricane and the high-pressure system, you've got 62 mile an hour, super high gusts of wind coming over the West Maui mountain range and down into the basin of Lahaina. Hurricane Dora was a huge part of this story. And what's amazing is that this hurricane started as a tropical depression back in late July, and it traveled almost 10,000 miles, starting in the Atlantic and going all the way across the Pacific. Pretty insane. And as you can see, even though it didn't make landfall and it was still 500 miles away, it had a huge impact in what happened. And as you can see here in this visualization, Dora remained a Category 4 all the way through passing Honolulu. Here in green, it was a low tropical system, picked up Category 2, Category 3, and it was Category 4 all the way until it passed the Hawaiian archipelago. This resulted in gusts between 45 and 60 miles per hour over Lahaina and actually 80 mile per hour over the big island of Hawaii. So the net result of these two weather systems, 45 to 60, 65 mile per hour winds over Lahaina and 80 mile per hour winds over the big island. So again, we don't know for sure, but I think the most likely cause was downed power lines that were still energized. Hawaiian Electric stock plummeted 40% Monday morning after a class action lawsuit filed over the weekend alleged that Maui's devastating wildfires were caused by the utility's energized power lines that were knocked down by strong winds. There are several videos on X, formerly Twitter, where residents shared scary sights of power lines swaying in gale-force winds. Again, this hasn't been confirmed, but based on timelines, it's at least the most probable cause. Some reports show the people of Lahaina losing power as early as 4 a.m., a few hours before the fire started. And this is actually what caused the 2018 wildfires that devastated the town of Paradise in California, the Camp Fires, which began on November 8, 2018, when a suspension hook known as a C-hook of a nearly 100-year-old transformer tower in the Sierra foothills in eastern Butte County broke, causing a power line to fall against a metal tower and sent sparks into dry grass below. PG&E, the utility responsible in California, pled guilty to 84 counts of manslaughter in 2020. Sadly, aging infrastructure and poor modernization efforts have plagued the U.S. for decades, and with severe weather, it's only going to get worse. So in a lot of ways, this was a compounding of a lot of really unfortunate events. Another is that the New York Times reported that the town's water system may have also failed to maintain water pressure. So as firefighters tapped into fire hydrants, there was actually not enough water pressure to fight these flames. How was the water system run? Was it run on electric pumps? In which case, if the power goes out, do the water pumps go out? Was there water towers with elevation? It's tricky to say, and I don't know all the details just yet, but that is a glaring oversight. You can't lose water in the event of a power outage because there's really no way to fight fires then. The geography also played a huge role in how quickly the fire spread. Backed up to the Pacific Ocean on the west and the West Maui Mountains on the east, fire spread at an alarming rate. The 50-mile-an-hour winds that resulted from Hurricane Dora and the high-pressure region to the north fanned the flames and created almost a blast furnace. All fires need oxygen, and 50-mile-an-hour winds provide plenty of it. Plus, being backed up against the West Maui Mountains, the radiant heat from the fires were either reflected back toward Lahaina or absorbed, resulting in hotter temperatures that were then fed back into the fire from the prevailing winds. And the highest point of this West Maui mountain range is Pui Kukui at 5,788. So because they were backed up against the West Maui mountain range, and that's where the winds were coming up from, that hot air was being fed right back into the fire. And in essence, that's kind of what a blast furnace is. The limiting factor in a fire is oxygen. Without oxygen, eventually a fire will die. But if you can continue to provide oxygen at a higher rate, the fire will grow. Another contributing factor is the historic nature of Lahaina. Many of the buildings are really old and historic, made out of wood, and probably don't meet modern building codes. Modern building codes require fire doors, fire retardant insulation, and other considerations to help sequester fires for longer periods of time without completely spreading. Older homes don't have a lot of these considerations. And this is one of the really unfortunate things about older construction is unless they've been modernized, where they've been renovated with new insulation or other building-proof materials, it's hard to know how they'll handle fires. When it comes to fire science, there's a couple of factors at play. One I mentioned is radiant heat. All things above absolute zero radiate heat. You can typically measure that in infrared spectrum, and that's how IR goggles work, or like FLIR imaging cameras. And in this case, the radiant heat didn't just spread everywhere, it was backed up against the mountain range, so at least half of that heat was being absorbed by the mountain, increasing the temperature of the incoming wind. The second is convection, when you have air moving over something. And in this case, mostly natural convection, because hot air rises, cool air comes in, and you have a natural cycle. Third, we have embers. Embers are the things that you see that get picked up by the wind and travel over the air and can land on another field and spread fires that way. But then there's also firebrands, which are larger objects thrown literally by the wind during a fire. So this could be anything from like a roof tile or anything that gets caught by the wind while on fire. And then there's flashover, which is essentially when wood gas flows into an area or pocket and ignites like a bomb. There's actually some videos that I've seen where there's like a fireball rolling down the street, and that's likely what this is. When the outer bark of a tree starts to ignite, it can release a gas that's actually kind of explosive. It's like a biogas. And as 50-mile-an-hour winds carry it along and it's already ignited and the temperatures are really high, you have kind of a rolling flash flame. And some of the videos that I've seen are that. At the end of the day, there have been so many reports of all kinds of craziness, but honestly, most of this stuff can completely be explained. Also, there are fire tornadoes, which, no, it's not a Michael Bay movie. It's just the process of extreme convection where fireballs seem to take on a tornado shape because of just how hot they are and how quickly the heat rises, pulling the flame with it. Here's another consideration that came into play. More than 400,000 hectares of the island is covered by invasive, fire-prone grasses, which help the flames continue to grow. To understand the modern state of affairs in Hawaii, we need to do a little bit of historical research. The Dole Fruit Company stopped growing pineapples in Hawaii in 2009, after like a century of doing so. Secondly, Alexander and Baldwin Inc. spent all of 2016 shutting down its 140-year-old sugar cane plantation. Remember the fires in 2019? Those happened on deserted old sugarcane plantations. Thirdly, as ranchers introduced cattle onto the island of Hawaii, they started to grow grass to feed them, largely Guinea grass from largely Africa. And this is a non-native species that completely has taken over the island. And there is, as we mentioned, hundreds of thousands of hectares of this invasive species of grass. This grass can grow incredibly quickly, up to like 6 inches a day. And once the dry season hits, it dries out and becomes complete fuel for fire. This gets into one of the conspiracy theories that I've seen floating around online, that this entire thing is a targeted attack and it's a land grab, a way for wealthy investors and billionaires to buy up land on the cheap. Let's start from the beginning of the history of Hawaii. In 1826, the first Hawaiian-U.S. Treaty of Friendship, Commerce, and Navigation was signed. In 1843, Kamehameha III cedes the island to Great Britain on February 25th under force. Great Britain eventually reinstates Kamehameha III as ruler of Hawaii. In 1845, with growing fears of a foreign takeover of Hawaii and its land, the Board of Commissioners to Quiet Land Titles is established. An act authorized the sale of government land to foreigners. In 1848, Kamehameha III's land distribution, the Great Mahele, begins. It's a process rather than a one-time event where lands are divided between the king and chiefs. And this is where the beginning of the distribution of Hawaii begins, because before all of this, Hawaii was not owned by any individuals. The people of Hawaii believed that the land was owned by God. But now King Kamehameha III fills his cabinet with foreign ministers. Not everyone is pleased with the growing influence of missionaries. It's a new era of prosperity for missionary families as they start plantations growing things like sugarcane and pineapple. In 1893, the Committee of 13 renames itself the Committee of Public Safety and declares the throne vacant on January 15th. The U.S. overthrows the Hawaiian monarchy, and Sanford Dole, a missionary descendant, negotiates an annexation treaty with the Harrison administration. But President Cleveland delivers a message to Dole asking for his resignation and to restore the legitimate government of Hawaii to power. Dole refuses. On January 3rd, 1893, the independent Kingdom of Hawaii is illegally overthrown. On January 16th, 1893, the Committee of Safety asked U.S. troops to protect Americans as they brought down the Hawaiian monarchy by force. The Queen yields her throne, believing that the legitimate U.S. government would do the right thing and reinstate her. In 1894, the Dole government declared itself the Republic of Hawaii. And fun fact, for about 4 years, Hawaii was its own country. So the Republic of Hawaii had its first president, which was Sanford Dole. On July 7th in 1898, through a joint resolution of Congress, Hawaii is annexed. All Hawaiian crown lands are ceded to the U.S. Come April 30th, 1900, Hawaii is a U.S. territory, and Sanford Dole is appointed the first governor. If that name sounds familiar, well, that's because James Dole is the cousin of Sanford Dole, and he started the Dole Fruit Company and started pineapple plantations all along Hawaii. December 7th, 1941, Japan strikes Pearl Harbor, and martial law is declared. But surprisingly, Hawaii still wasn't a state, because Hawaii wouldn't become a state of the U.S. until 1959. Why does all this matter? Well, the history of Hawaii is a really sad one, and that's why the people of Hawaii feel so proud of their culture and they try to preserve it as much as they do. The U.S. literally just stole Hawaii from them, that made them a territory, made them a country, made them a state, and this is all without their approval or authority or their willingness. And on top of that, big companies like Dole have rolled in, brought plantations and other things, brought cattle, brought guinea grass, and other things that have contributed to these fires. When you bring in an invasive species to an island that didn't have them, you're completely shifting the entire ecological structure and balance. And in this example, because of the dry spells and the rains and the falls, you've got incredible dead brush that can cause fires. So all of that kind of plays a role. Now, in terms of one of the conspiracy theories that this is a big land grab, let's break this down a little bit. So one of the arguments that I heard is that all the rich people's mega mansions didn't burn and Lahaina did. Well, there's a couple of things to that. The rich people's mega mansions are new construction. They're built with modern building codes with fire resistance in mind. Also, they're massive acreages where the homes are separated from each other by, in some examples, miles or acres, right? Also, they all have beautiful, lush green grass that's very well manicured and very short. None of that is much of a fire hazard compared to Lahaina with their old wooden buildings and much higher density of buildings. That could be a contributing factor, but again, I'm just speculating at this point. The second thing is that this is a land grab, and I think that has tainted this entire tragedy. And I think we are losing focus of what really matters, which is the people of Hawaii and all the people that are still missing to this day, right? If we look at this as people with directed energy weapons, which that's just a term that I absolutely hate, because there was a post on social media saying that this was a direct energy weapon attack, which was totally debunked. And in fact, it was a transformer that was sparking in Chile years before. We lose sight of what really matters. Now, is there a land grab component? Yes, because I've also seen people on social media, people in Hawaii, claiming that they've been called by investors, by realtors, asking if they want to sell their land right now. Because people are probably panicking. They've lost their entire livelihoods, everything they own. And how will these insurance companies pay out? Are they going to go bankrupt? It's really hard to tell, and it's an incredibly scary time. But to be so incredibly selfish as to call these families in their most vulnerable moment to try to buy up this land now on the cheap is horrible. So two things can be true. This could just be an act of nature, and there can be absolute horrible human beings on this planet who are always trying to take advantage of things. And I think that's exactly what's happening here. There's an article on the BBC that I thought was quite insightful because they really did a good job of disproving some of this stuff. This is the direct energy weapon post, and I hate these titles. Like, I was warned not to post this video. It's so stupid because this is a freaking lie. This is a transformer exploding in Chile. That does happen sometimes. It's not a direct energy weapon. Here's another one that I saw on social media. If the fires in Hawaii were natural, then what is this, right? This idea that, first of all, you never know if something's photoshopped or not, but like, what is going on here? And this one's actually pretty simple. It's known as a light pillar, and it's an optical illusion formed by reflections off ice crystals on a cold day. But what happens with cameras and glare is pretty interesting. For example, look at this light right up here. Look what happens when I move my hand over it. You see that? That is glare coming off of that light. here's another one, and I saw this as well, is if this was natural, how come the trees are all still standing and the structure's all burned? And as you can clearly see, there's a ton of destruction to the trees as well. There may be the occasional tree standing, but most of them are completely leveled. In all those cases, those are people who can't really explain something, asking a question, and that's okay. But there's also like Photoshop stuff. Like there was a church in Lahaina that burned down, and there was a picture that the Lahaina state shared, and people had added like a streak of light saying that it was a strike or like a direct energy weapon or something. And that was just flat out not true. It was falsified. It was a Photoshop effect. So I ask everyone to remember that you have to try to get some sense of what you're looking at and don't go sharing things unnecessarily. Because the truth is, if you go back and look while doing my research, some of these ridiculous nonsense posts got way more views than the actual information of what was happening. And that is a shame and just a huge disservice from our social media culture. But I urge all of you guys to try to keep in mind that a couple things can be true. There can be huge land grab potentials during controversies and during tragedies, but that doesn't mean that they were the ones that caused it. Now, I'm not here to tell anyone how to think or what to believe about anything. I hope you can start to see that this was kind of a perfect storm, and Hawaii was not prepared. This here is Lahaina, and there's literally one road to the north and to the south to come in and out. If anything happened along these paths to block it, there would be no escape route for any of the citizens living in these regions. I think Hawaii deeply underprepared for the potential of a fire. And like we mentioned with Hurricane Lane in 2018, hurricanes stoking huge gusts can have huge ramifications. Also, the Hawaii Energy Company should really probably be at blame as well, and they already are, because you have to start thinking about burying these lines. Anytime you see power lines overhead, that is a potential for failure, right? Because if heavy winds or any other natural disaster come rolling through, you're going to have down power lines on top of everything else. And that is a bad recipe for disaster. If these companies could invest the money to bury these lines underground where most new construction is putting them, we would be much better off. But the challenge is we need to hold these companies accountable. PG&E, have they learned their lesson after what happened in Paradise in 2018? I'm not sure, because some of these companies will make the decision, it's cheaper just to settle the occasional lawsuit than it is to actually fix these problems. We're talking about hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles of power lines. This is not an easy problem, but we're going to continuously have situations like this arise if we don't bury power lines, if we don't better equip ourselves and be better prepared, if we make sure that our alert systems work. In the case of the Hawaiian state government, by the way, the big blame I would put on them is their siren system and not using them. If I lived in Hawaii and I saw a fire, and fires are pretty common, like we mentioned, 4 times more likely in recent decades, I wouldn't overreact unless those sirens went off. If you have a siren and don't use it, you're doing huge damage and disservice, because people expect those sirens to go off, alerting them to take action. And if it doesn't, they think, the fire's contained, we'll be fine. No reason to overreact and panic. But if you have those sirens and don't use them, bad things can happen. And that can never happen again. They need to have their own power systems that run outside of the grid. That way they can have power even if the grid goes down. Solar powered. I don't know how they would do it, but those systems have to work. And that is a huge problem. By the way, one more piece of controversy, and you can't make this up. The same Maui police chief, John Pelletier, was also the incident commander for the Las Vegas shooting that was mired in conspiracy theories as well, where, one of the big worst shootings in American history. And now he's here in Maui. You can't make this stuff up. But through all the noise, my goal to be the engineer's guide to the galaxy is to find the signal through the noise. And what I see is a need for us to figure out how we can do better in the future. We have to take concrete action, because fire is going to be one of the new hottest natural disasters over the next 10 years. Because of general warming of the oceans, we're going to have worse storms. That storm, Hurricane Dora, traveled nearly 10,000 miles. That doesn't normally happen. Our hearts here are with all of you that are impacted by this. This is a true tragedy, and it's something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about, honestly. We just donated money to the King's Cathedral in Maui, who are kind of on the ground doing a lot of good work out there. We'll put a list in the description to other resources where you can donate money or goods and services, whatever you have available to help the people. Because as I mentioned, 99 people have been declared dead so far, and they've only really gone through about 3% of the rubble. This problem is still very much in its infancy. And also, if you're thinking about going to Maui on vacation, I'd highly encourage you to maybe reconsider. Any of those hotel rooms that you don't occupy would be available for those who have lost their homes to help provide shelter and food and services and just be less distracted. And this is one of the first things I heard from a lot of the locals there is don't come. Please let us heal. Let us take care of our own and not be distracted with tourism on top of everything else. We'll put links in the description to all the different ways you can help. Thank you for watching, and I hope this helps a little bit in terms of understanding why this happened and what concrete actions we can take in the future, because I think we have to. All right. Until next week, this is Riku Da Vinci. Thanks so much for watching.